Well, everyone, let's now turn our attention to the future of banking and get an insider's view into it. This is Microsoft Future Ready Industry Week, where we are going to try and figure out now how do you empower intelligent banking? And who better to talk about how you can use data, how you can use AI, how you can personalize, how you can get a deep understanding of customers, what you can do with risk, than Ramesh Lakshminarayanan, the CIO of HDFC Bank, somebody who's done the journey from looking at information in another big bank, then startup of his own, and now the CIO of HDFC Bank. So Ramesh, it's such a pleasure to have you with us. Exciting times. Is the future of banking arriving faster than we think it was going to do?
Yeah, thanks. It's a pleasure to be here. Yes, I think it's happening faster, and it's happening faster by the hour. Actually, I think it's that phase, where if you look at it nicely, the banking in India started way back in 90s. Largely ATMs and automation around core banking, and then you had a phase of internet banking, which came in around the early 2000s. And then, the payment started, the cards payments, the e-com revolution. And, it was a kind of, I would say, slumber march till about 2015, 16. And probably then you had the demonetization, suddenly kind of throwing up a very different challenge for the bankers, right? Suddenly everything became, digitized, people trying to kind of get to mobile apps. Then, of course, the UPI advent was very interesting because that again brought in a very different angle. Then, of course, from there, then the pandemic last 2 years, it's just kind of taken it to a different level today, Vikram, because banking is today into the hinterlands and the heartlands of the country, right? And that's the fundamental difference. You do billion transactions, in a day on UPI. You have billions of, payments happening across the country, real time, 24/7. So it's a very, very different ecosystem, and it's changing very rapidly.
A lot of stuff happening on mobile phones. You don't necessarily have to go into the branches anymore. But before I had some somewhat more technical questions to ask you. But before I come to that, just wanted to understand, Ramesh, from your own journey, because big bank startup, which you then sold back to a big bank. Where's the real innovation and excitement happening? And when we were chatting before this, you were talking about how sometimes it's the big organizations, the big banks like HDFC, which are now trying to get that startup thinking inside them, which is interesting and an exciting opportunity, I'm sure.
No, I think it's an interesting question, because both sides are kind of jostling along, right? Now, the startups are bringing a lot of innovation. That every day we see unicorns coming up. A lot of focus on digitization, mobile payments, usage of AI, ML, and there's a vibrant startup setup, and I think. In that sense, it's created a kind of a pathway and a roadway. See, a few years back, if you see, the large enterprises would look at peer enterprises, so the banks would always look at peer banks as competition. That's not the case today. There's a 20-member startup who's challenging you, right, on a daily basis, and they can be nimble, they can be fast. On the other hand, you are large, you have, it's not easy for you to be agile. But then, they have their problems, the funding and the kind of talent they can pay for. You have some of those resources available. So I think what will play out is really how does, both these systems come along. And there will be few breakout players. But I think definitely the enterprise journey, it's a different challenge. For large enterprises, you've already scaled up, but then how do you, kind of bring your teams, make them agile, cut through the bureaucracy, make it nimble, get innovation, because not every new smart talent would want to work in a large enterprise environment. So those are the challenges. But both systems will coexist here.
Right, Ramesh, let's now get into some of the specifics. And obviously the big focus is very much on data, right? How do you use data to get real-time insights? How do you do differentiated products, different services? How do you use data to manage risk? How do you use data for compliance? From your point of view, how are you using data in any of these areas? Customer experience, operational efficiency, risk, competitive advantage, all of the above?
I think, Vikram, again, great question. Banks today, Vikram, and especially banks like HDFC and some of the other peer banks, is that they're sitting on 25, 30 years of real data. And fundamentally in banking, you would kind of agree that managing risks is one of the cornerstones. And if you look at the data, one of the real, I would say, drivers to managing risk better is the ability to use data better. And the data, if it got a vintage, and when I say vintage, you see cyclical turns in economy, right? I mean, you will always find, ups and downs. And if you have a data that's cutting across that cycle, that's the kind of richness that some of the banks have from a data perspective. But the challenge is that's from a risk perspective. Of course, the same applies from a front end customer experience perspective, from from automating operations perspective, from areas, diverse areas, even areas like technology automation. How do you use data? For example, simple stuff like, can I predict my downtimes of my applications? Right? It could go down to that level. So I think usage of data is absolutely essential. It's not just limited to marketing, sales, not limited to fraud, risk, operations, technology. It's kind of ubiquitous in that sense. Most of the enterprise organizations have followed a life cycle of the data where they've gone for large enterprise data warehouses. They've built grounds up data stores over a period of 25, 30 years. And they've been built on a set of, I would say, now a legacy kind of technology platform, because today the rate at which the data is growing, keeping it on-prem, trying to kind of analyze it using traditional data technologies, it's not possible because the rate at which the data is growing is simply not manageable. So I think what's changing is the kind of underlying technology framework. So if you look at it today, you can pull up the enterprise data warehouses very easily, push them to cloud. You can use a lot of kind of cloud capabilities, be it in the area of usage of AI/ML models, usage of some of the new cool what's called a horizontal scalable memory processing technologies. You can do horizontally scalable data stores. So the ability to manage data at a large scale is at your fingertips, unlike what it used to happen a few years back. I think at HDFC Bank, we kind of realized that, and we have a very differentiated approach. We are actually moving all our data workloads onto the Azure cloud now. We're slowly kind of pushing our centralized old platforms into the new cloud age kind of data capabilities. But what's more important is, can the data go closer to the business? That's a fundamental difference. See, a lot of the data projects used to happen technology driven, right? And in that sense, the best users of the data are the business domain guys, because they understand, they're closest to the customer. So what we have taken is a slightly different approach. So while we are moving these workloads from on-premises to cloud, what we're also trying to do is to come back with the concept of federated data models, where our data models are sitting close to each of the business users. So a fraud management unit can have its own data mart, which is exclusive, which they can kind of cut, slice. They understand the use cases, and then they can kind of build upon it. The second part is, of course, just curating the data, putting it together. All of that is now very easy given the kind of cloud technology and platform that come. But more than that, the kind of AI and ML models that are available and on the go in some of the cloud computing platforms, that's where the real differentiator. So take simple examples today that you could actually be real time. When you do fraud management, you could actually cut at the time of a transaction. Earlier, we always used to call near real time. But today we can actually go real time analysis, right? You could look at behavioral patterns when you're logging in today. You can actually understand through AML models whether Vikram is actually the Vikram who's logging into that platform at that point of time. Even things like your own fingerprint, the keystroke models can be predicted, right? How do you type? That
really, you already reached that. You've already reached that level that you can tell by how fast I'm typing.
Yes, you can actually get to that level. We've not yet got there. We are actually moving in that direction, Vikram. In fact, that's one of the projects that we are undertaking as we go along.
I started noticing it. Like, I get the call saying you're using your credit card. If it's anything unusual, not the way I normally do it, I often do get that call saying, is it you? And sometimes you wonder, it's obvious if you're in a different location or a different country, but sometimes even otherwise it can happen, which is good. I just leading off from that though, I had a question. When you are one of the largest and the most successful banks in the country, One of the issues when it comes to trying something new, moving to the cloud, moving everything to Azure, doing anything else which is very different is you've got legacy systems, right? You've got legacy systems, you've got a way of doing things, you've got a whole bunch of employees who say, Humne to hamesha aisa hi kiya hai, why are you asking us to do something radically different? Is that a challenge if you're a big entrenched player that you're saying, I'm not going to dismantle my legacy systems to try something new, and which may be something which is easier for somebody who's more of a startup or more of a new age platform or more digitally native for them to try crazy stuff is okay. I mean, I feel this constantly at Heritage. We're not an established media house, so we can do crazy stuff, which you may hesitate to do if you're a big giant media organization.
I think bang on, Vikram. Right? That's why I said the largest challenges of turning around the enterprise lies in your mind. Actually, it's the battle of the human mind. Actually, because change is not easy. But having said that, I also think that's a great opportunity. The CEO, the chief digital officer, the chief information officer, they are the drivers of the change on technology. They will have to take the risk. First is obviously the adoption of the technology, but that's easy because there is technology available, there are skills available. Yes, you'll have to go and hunt for those skills, get them, but conceptually it's an execution game, right? It's more about execution. The other part is how do you take along the people who are already there with you? It's a very, very difficult task because you're suddenly telling somebody who's done the same job for 20 years, saying, guess what, this works very differently on the cloud, and you need to acquire that skill. And it's not easy, because it's human nature, it's human behavior. So it's not just about understanding technology, not about cloud native, containerized, microservices. Those are easy things to do. It's all about going back and telling your people, look, you can do it. You should do it because this is also good for you in the long run. And that's the kind of change agents that you have to be actually.
Ramesh, getting your workforce to move to the new realities, perhaps the pandemic has been paradoxically somewhat helpful because if you look, for example, I was just reading the Microsoft latest Global Work Trend Index, which is talking about something like 50% of all employees and 67% in India actually thinking or considering hybrid work options. So the fact that hybrid work is something that is a reality for people in their own lives, or they're considering it, or they have been using it during the pandemic, that might be able to help you tell them that, okay, look, these are the new digital realities in the year 2022. So you've got to adapt to it. The fact that you're willing to be working from home and you're doing hybrid, it means that you're that much more open to new ways of doing things to what you've always done.
Absolutely, Vikram. In fact, you will be surprised that the kind of adoption that HDFC Bank employees went through. I mean, in 5 months, we actually straight away migrated 180,000 people onto Microsoft Office 365. I mean, we were always on-prem. And this bank hasn't done a project at that level in 5 months' time. I mean, it was flat 5 months, and everybody was onto Teams, Microsoft Office 365, SharePoint, and that just kind of said, look, this is a very different world. But what happened, like you said, after that, what we saw is when people started collaborating, kind of looking at digital ecosystem in a different mode, we also saw a lot of volunteering on skill based. In fact, today, if you ask me, I have a very simple KPI in the organization, Vikram, which is can at least 2 courses can be done by every single employee in a year. Okay, this is nothing but a Udemy course that we do. When we started, there was hardly an offtake. In fact, we used to push people saying, take the courses, take the courses. Today, I can tell you in last 7-8 months, we've had that number going up to 84%. Okay, in a very small, because people are realizing.
So skilling is an important part of what you're doing, and skilling you think is a crucial thing for all and getting them used to the new technological advances. It's an important part of what you're doing.
Yeah, Vikram, the how is the most important. A lot of people have spent a lot of time building these organizations, and they're proud about their work, right? What they need is that catalyst saying what will, how to get to those skills, right? So skills is very clearly one, and the other part is then apply the same skill, the acquired skill onto your existing project. So for a very interesting example, I can tell you a lot of my team members, what they've done, they've gone back to their legacy application, and they've after kind of not just taking these skills, but also understanding with a lot of help from, cloud service providers, be it the Microsoft and all of the other, larger hyperscalers. They've actually trained themselves. They've also gone back to their partners. What we have started doing is we started rewriting our legacy applications into cloud. So that's a fundamental difference. The same set of people. So they have started understanding what a DevOps pipeline looks like, what a CI/CD means, how does a container, structure work, all of that. And when they are allowed to do that, then you will see a very rapid transmission. So what we did was we kind of focused on reskilling and pushing a lot of the projects onto the new platform using our existing people. At the same time, we also brought in a lot of people, Vikram, from outside. We also created a concept of an enterprise and a digital factory. It's quite a kind of well known in the industry now. We run these factories where we got the new set of guys also, because it's important to mix when you start seeing people from other fields coming through. So we went and picked up a lot of people from startups, from the big tech companies, from the fintech companies. And what we started doing is we started kind of running projects across the board, which kind of work in hybrid model. Like you said, it's more hybrid model from a people perspective. And that's been a real differentiator for us. I would say that's in fact, if you ask me, that's probably one of the solution creators for the kind of transformation that we are aspiring to do.
Right, that's all been really fascinating. One last question though, as we move more digital, as we move more tech, as more and more of it is, people not going into a bank branch, but getting, interacting on your mobile phone. The threat or the risk of cyber crimes, of what is going to happen, is there phishing attacks that are taking place? I sometimes get notifications that I'm not sure whether it's really come from the bank or whether it's come from somebody else. Sometimes this could be something which I'm not supposed to be clicking on. This must be becoming a bigger and bigger threat and a bigger and bigger concern area for someone like you.
Yes, Vikram, it is. In fact, if you ask me, with the digital explosion that we've seen, the surface attack has simply kind of gone up, right? I mean, you have that much of opportunity to kind of hack into the systems. But I think a couple of things here. One, I also think that we have to move beyond the traditional way of looking at security, right? And which is largely, when we looked at things like password protection, having a stronger password, those were very basic things that we used to do earlier. Today, if you see, Vikram, the kind of hacking attacks that happen, just to give you a little example, most of the hacking attacks are socially engineered on senior citizens today. Right? Yeah. In a digital ecosystem. How do you protect that? For example, today, the biggest attack is mirroring of mobile phones. You do not even know that you've got a software installed into your mobile that is being replicated by another fraudster who's exactly seeing. So whether you're getting your OTPs, whether you're going to get your clicks that you do, all of that is being mimicked by somebody sitting somewhere else, right? And you don't even know about it. And you guess what? It's so easy then to kind of, defraud because your session is open. This kind of a stuff, nobody in the front end would know. So, for example, what we started doing is, so we have a platform now, our mobile application, for example, today completely builds a wrapper around the application. So when you launch an HDFC Bank mobile, somebody else from the other side tries to mirror it, he will get a blank screen actually because there's a wrapper put around. You would never realize this. It's a simple technique. Yeah. Beyond this, like you said, a lot of behavioral analytics, like you mentioned, like how do I look at whether you're using the same device, you're using the same SIM card, you're using a different, and suddenly you kind of logged in from a new, workstation or a new PC. These patterns have to be detected. Then comes transaction monitoring, which is the other part. You have a certain behavioral pattern. You probably are not taken out more than 10,000 rupees ever in your account, and suddenly you're asking for a 40,000 rupee account on a particular day, at a particular time, which is not matching the pattern. Boom, you should be able to immediately put out to the customer and say this is not done. So a lot of that security is at the customer front end. So that's one part of it. The other part is how do you protect your enterprise security, right? How your data centers, how do you kind of secure your larger assets. And I think that's where, again, some of the new technologies, see, cloud, for example, some years back used to be seen as a security threat. Actually, a lot of questions to be asked, why are you going to public cloud? Anybody can access. But today, if you ask me, look at companies, whether it's Microsoft, they are running their large cloud centers, and they're constantly looking at the internet space as to what kind of new threats are coming. For banks to do that individually, it's not possible. So there's a collective, let's say, advantage that you get by pooling the resources in cloud. Then, of course, the sophistication, like I said, a lot of these patterns are today, a lot of these security threats are more machine learning driven. it's not driven, the rules are not driven by rule engines, actually. They're all machine learning logics that come in. And this is clearly, you have to be ahead of the curve. And security, Vikram, is paramount. I think a lot of it happens in the background. But if you ask me, a lot of our effort, in fact, 30 to 40 or 50% of our time actually goes in constructing secure solutions. Of course, scale and the intuitive and intuitiveness and all of that is secondary. But security is because we are in financial services. You get this wrong, it can be a big issue.
I think those are all points well taken. And one sort of suggestion, if I may give as a user, is one of the interests. See, banks like HDFC are such a trusted name. So sometimes people will use that to lure you into another area which is completely away. So you can't do analytics. They've taken them away to some phishing site or installing some malware, just saying this is the message from HDFC Bank to you. So like you do on your mobile app where you say, can you see this or something like that? Maybe you should have a education plan around SMSs that no SMS from HDFC Bank will come if it doesn't have this, or we will never ask you for your password or stuff like that. I know you're doing that already, but that's useful.
Yeah, Vikram, we are doing. In fact, we ran a very interesting campaign called "Muh Band Rakho." I don't know if you've seen this around in social circle. We just consciously tell customers that the biggest things about passwords. Do not passwords, credentials. Nothing, just be quiet when you're doing a financial transaction. Be aware, do basics right, so you're right. But yeah, lots to do. It's a constant education, customer education.
It's a constant struggle to stay ahead of them. The future of banking looks really exciting. Ramesh Lakshminarayanan, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you, Vikram. It's a pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you.